Recording in progress.
Bom dia a todo alguém. Bem-vindo àquela painel de comunidade, aquele segundo dia de aquele dossiê de conversas para que os candidatos final para busca de comitê de Boston Public School. Meu nome é Pam Edinger, a minha presidente de Banco Hill Community College.
Pam, I'm sorry if I can interrupt for 1 second. I'm so sorry. All interpreters, I need to make sure that you're in your channels. So if you're on I'm sorry, interpreters, can you hold on for 1 second? I'm sorry. Can we make sure that each of us are in our channels? I think someone's on the English channel. So just make sure that you're in your selected language channel, just so everyone can hear, please.
Let me know when I can continue.
All right, I'm
Deixa
sorry,
eu saber
Pam,
a
you
hora
can
que
continue.
pode continuar.
Are we good? Okay. All right. Well, then it's good for me to say that we are offering interpretation today in the 9 BPS languages. The interpretation feature has been turned on. Please note that everyone needs to join a channel, including English speakers. If you want to listen to the conversation in English, please join the English channel by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. To support our ASL interpreters, please name yourself before speaking. And participants, please note that if you would like to have the ASL interpreter box larger, you can pin this panelist by clicking on the 3 buttons in the top right corner of that box and selecting pin. Today's meeting is being recorded to serve as a resource for the school committee members and to make available for those who cannot be with us today. And to preserve the integrity of this process, the candidate is using a BPS issue laptop and is not allowed to refer to their phone during the panel interview. The Superintendent Search Committee has been tasked by the school committee to conduct a thorough search. A little bit of history. Beginning in March, we began by hosting a series of public listening sessions and community stakeholder meetings. The feedback voiced by students, family, educators, and other community partners was incorporated into the superintendent's job description and informed the search committee members' interview questions. Beginning with 34 candidates, the search committee narrowed the pool to 8 candidates throughout May and June and conducted several rounds of interviews. On Friday, June 16th, the search committee conducted its final deliberations and voted to select a group of finalists for the school committee's consideration. 2 candidates have since withdrawn from the process prior to the start of public interviews. The 2 finalist candidates we have today are Mary Skipper, the superintendent of Somerville Public Schools, and our candidate today, Dr. Tommy Welch, Region 1 school superintendent at Boston Public Schools. And our panel today with Dr. Tommy Welch will be 65 minutes, as it was yesterday with Superintendent Mary Skipper. Before we get to the agenda, I would like to briefly introduce members of our panel of community partners today who will interview Dr. Welch, and thank you for your time and your participation. So we have Sean Brown from Becoming a Man. We have Kate Barron, Horizons for Homeless Children. We have Aisha Francis, the president of Benjamin Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology. We have Denise Kesrari from Youth Connect. We have Jose Masso from the Boston Centers for Youth and Family. We have Marinelle Ruminier, the CEO of Edvestors. And we have Desa. Did I say that right? Is it Disa or Desa?
Disa.
Thank you so much. Disa Santana from the Public Health Commission. Each panelist has prepared a question, and I will mix panelist questions with questions from the public, so we would have a nice mixture. We've drawn from the suggested questions that many of you talked about at the public listening sessions and through the Superintendent Search Survey launched in March. We also invite you to submit your questions live using the Q&A function in Zoom at the bottom of your screen. And we'll ask a limited number of live questions as time permits during our 65 minutes together. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and ask our panelists to kick us off. I'm going to ask Marinelle Ruminaire to start us off with the first panelist question, if Dr. Welch is ready.
Yes.
Yes, he's nodding. So we're ready. Go ahead, Marinelle.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Ettinger. Good morning, Dr. Welch. My name is Marinelle Ruminaire, and I am a BPS parent, as well as the president and CEO of Edvestors, which is an education nonprofit that partners deeply with the Boston Public Schools. We bring financial resources, implementation support, and education expertise to our shared work in arts education, math education, career pathways, and racial equity in schools. We also highlight what's working through our annual School on the Move Prize. So for my question, I'll just preface with, I think, a shared understanding that we know Boston is rich in resources and too often not strategic in how they are deployed. We also know the school district can't address the many needs of its constituencies alone. Can you please talk about how you'll harness the extraordinary partnership potential that Boston possesses among its nonprofit, higher education, philanthropic, and business communities? And through your answer, it'd be great if you could include an example of how you've previously engaged with multiple partners to better serve young people.
Great. Thank you very much for your question, Marinelle. It's great to see you again. I believe the role of a superintendent, or the role of a principal for that matter, cannot be done by themselves. It requires many partners, many actors to help with the work that's before them. That can't be any more clear than the city of Boston, you mentioned, especially coming out of the twin pandemics. I need partners, other people across the table from me who know the city, who have the expertise in several different areas to help our students move forward, especially our most vulnerable student populations, as well as the schools who need it most. In my experience as the Region 1 school superintendent, supporting 7,100 students, 15 schools, primarily East Boston, Charlestown, and the North End, I have seen the power of partnerships throughout my 7 years here. I understand how they work, both in my experience as a principal, but as well as a regional leader. I think that one of the most important parts about harnessing the most partnership potential is really understanding why folks are going to be working with students and what the need is. It's almost like a lesson plan, right? You have your objectives of your lesson, your expected outcomes, and it takes planning, right? If we're going to have partnership in our schools, we have to be clear what the outcomes are. Folks have to understand why they're going to be working with folks and to what end. In my region, I think every year there's been dozens of partners coming to work with us, either through support and professional development, after school funding, programming during the day. But it's clear that with understanding why we're doing this and how it's impacting the students, our principals, our students, our teachers are benefiting. The clear, the through line through the partnership work in Region 1 has been that the principals really understand how this is going to come in, and the detailed conversation, the planning before, really leads to more of I hear from our partners like, wow, your school or your network is very user-friendly in the way they work with us. And it's because of all the pre-work that goes into it that's not rushed. So we understand exactly what everybody's doing to what end. As far as specific examples with nonprofit, higher education, philanthropic and business communities, you've seen it firsthand as the CEO president of Edvestors. There's been a lot of work in our region, in our schools, not only ours, but across the district, but in my experience working with you. But I'd like to highlight a couple of examples coming out of the pandemic. My team of principals works very collaboratively together. We secured a huge funding source from one of our local education nonprofits to help with the planning for the return and the reopening of schools. Four of our schools went through the process and planning for how they would reopen the school, and create basically a playbook and a planning guide for not only their schools, but they shared it with all the rest of our schools in our region, just helping us understand how the complexities of coming back with the unknown would actually play out as we entered a more hybrid version of learning. At the same time as we were coming back, we partnered with a new curriculum group called Fish Tank Learning. And knowing that, you know, the capacity to do professional development in our district is spread thin at times, we really worked with this team to help them understand what the needs are of our students in our classrooms, so they could craft a professional development plan as we rolled out a new ELA curriculum. Yeah, so I think that those cover the questions. And is there anything else you need from that right now?
I don't think so. I think we covered it. Many thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Unmute. Here we go. Thank you, Marinelle, and thank you, Dr. Welch. I think next up is Aisha Francis. President Francis.
Hello, good morning, Dr. Welch. Good to see you. I am Aisha Francis. I am the president and CEO of Benjamin Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology, and I am also a Boston Public Schools parent. And I'm happy to be involved in this panel as the president of a college where 40% of our students are Boston Public School graduates, and we have a focus on technical and trade education, the only college in the city that is a technical college. And our goal is to connect as many people as possible to practical education that pays well and leads to good jobs. And my question is regarding the graduation rate at Boston Public Schools. Over the past several years, multiple strategies have been put in place or floated to boost college credential attainment for BPS graduates. And some of these examples are Success Boston as an umbrella program that centers equity, investing in the International Baccalaureate program, encouraging more advanced placement course access, expanding early college, etc. How do you propose to boost momentum to raise the graduation rate at Boston Public Schools without going back to the drawing board again?
Thank you, Aisha. Great to see you again. I think we have tremendous opportunities right now, and one of my beliefs is that we have to make sure that all of our students and our parents, as well as the teachers, understand the path forward to graduation and beyond. With this investment that we're getting extra counselors in every single high school, several of our schools dropping down to serve 7th and 8th grade, it gives us an opportunity to prepare students at an earlier age before they enter 9th grade, when it really becomes crucial that these 9th grade credits start counting towards college. In my experience, working with families, working with students at an early age to map out what it looks like to not only get to that graduation stage and cross the stage with your diploma, but to map out what it looks like beyond. I think that the communication, the systems that we can put into place to further boost this information and understanding will help towards that. And on top of that, I mean, with all these extra investments coming in place for our academic counselors at high schools, like what does the professional development look like across the city to ensure that all schools, no matter what neighborhood they're in, are providing the same information and access to our students. I've seen this firsthand as a principal, a high school principal, actually no, as a high school administrator, working with students, really focusing on the pathway forward, understanding what gaps, what may be missing, what they need to hit graduation, but also opening the opportunities to them to explore postgraduate options while they are still in high school. I think this is still a mystery to many students. I think that when some of our students graduate, especially in Boston Public Schools, they may be the first student that is enrolling in college in their family. It just begs for additional counseling and support beyond the years that we have with them in Boston Public Schools. This happens informally with some of the relationships that our students have built with their adults on campus. I see it all the time at Charleston High School and East Boston High School, which are two schools that I support. Counselors and lead teachers going out of their way to even drop their students off at college and to mentor them throughout the first year. These are all informal network supports that I think that we can tidy up to ensure that not only our students get to college with these extra opportunities, but are successful in crossing the finish line as they graduate college as well.
Thank you for that reply.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Francis, and thank you, Dr. Welch. This is Pam Ettinger speaking again. Next up, we are going to take a question from the public. The question was submitted anonymously through our superintendent search survey. So Dr. Welch, here it comes. How do you plan to expand access to high quality vocational education and seek to partner with businesses and labor unions to create more opportunities?
I really like that second part of the question, partnering with labor unions and businesses. Madison Park is our vocational technical high school. I would love to work with the team there, as well as those labor boards and business partners, to help us create a vision for what vocational education looks like in the future. What are the industries that our city will be needing our students to come out and support as they enter their young adult years? I see the Madison Park facility as a tremendous opportunity to expand, especially coming out of the pandemic, where we have all these new resources to expand the day, to extend the day of learning, not only just for the students enrolled at Madison Park, but students across the city, and even looking at some of our young adults who are participating in our adult school programming. I come from my original district, Los Angeles. We had schools open basically from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. I would love to push and explore what a more extensive after school or twilight vocational tech program in certain areas. Like maybe some kids are in other schools, or maybe some folks are working during the day. How can we open that facility up to provide more opportunities to ensure that our working adults are going to be prepared for the industries that are going to be available in the future, aligning the certifications of the industries that our city needs most, and working with our partners and our labor boards to help us understand these trends as we move out in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Welch. This is Pam again speaking. And next up is Denise Khosrawi. Denise?
Good morning, Dr. Welch. My name is Denise Khosrawi. I am a parent of 2 BPS students, as well as the clinical director for Youth Connect. We are a program of the Boys and Girls Club of Boston, as well as have a partnership with the Boston Police Department. Youth Connect serves the most at-risk young people across the city of Boston, taking referrals from the Boston Police Department. We provide comprehensive wraparound, voluntary, free and confidential clinical services to kids and families. All of the staff are licensed clinical social workers, and our services are home, school, and community-based. We serve youth within the context of a whole family and in partnership with service providers. Our goal as a violence prevention program is to improve functioning of young people and their families at home, school, and in the community. Can you talk a little bit about the successful strategies you are proud of that you have employed, which reflect collaborative community partnerships to maintain the safety of all children in and out of school time?
Thank you for the question, Denise, and thank you for your work. I mentioned earlier, coming out of the pandemic, some of the challenges that have been heightened, in particular, some of the social emotional supports, mental health supports are on my mind. Seeing the higher number of referrals coming out of my 15 schools, just knowing that this is going to continue probably for a while, and wrapping our arms around the schools, filling the gaps that some of our smaller schools have, is of utmost importance. If our kids are not ready, prepared to be able to learn in school, it just like our adults, if there's high anxiety, high affective filter, the learning won't happen the way we want it. So thank you for your work. The question, I believe, is a strategy that I am proud of in my experience. I'm going to take this back to my days as a principal in Los Angeles. I worked with a high immigrant population in South Central Los Angeles, where 95% of my student enrollment were English learners or multilingual learners. One of the partners that I connected with through my time at UCLA was the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, MALDEF. And what this organization did, they were based out of downtown LA. They worked with families who were undocumented, more or less educating them what their rights were as families living in the shadows in many regards of our society. And so having workshops with them, having one-on-ones, making sure that all the services that our students are entitled to and are available were known to them through counseling, because this gets back to what I was saying earlier. If our students don't feel safe, if our families don't feel safe, when they come to school, they're not going to be prepared to learn. And many of these students are our most vulnerable students, and letting the families know that there are supports for them, they do have rights, was one of the priorities of me and my team. This happened through whole group meetings. We'd have community meetings after school, but I mentioned the one-on-one counseling. One of their satellite offices was less than a mile away. And we ensured that these folks, when issues came up, we would refer them directly for anything, a whole slew of services, including mental health and social emotional support. So that's something I'm extremely proud of. And you know, I'd love to explore working with you more. I love the Boys and Girls Club. Robert Lewis is one of my guys from East Boston. So appreciate the work you're doing, and thank you.
Good.
Thanks so much.
Okay, so this is Pam speaking. Next up is Mr. Sean Brown. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Welch. My name is Sean Brown. I am a proud alum of the BPS, Charlestown High graduate. I am the executive director of Youth Guidance Boston, where I oversee our 2 school-based counseling programs and Becoming a Man BAM and working on Womanhood WOW. And we are a proud partner of Boston, Cambridge, and some of those school districts. Youth Guidance is a leading provider of outcome-driven programs and capacity building initiatives, directly serving 14,000 young people across the country. In 2001, our Becoming a Man program was launched at Youth Guidance to help young men navigate difficult circumstances that threaten their future. And the goal was to address youth violence in the school to prison pipeline. BAM launched in Boston in 2017. And our sister program, WOW was launched in 2011 in Chicago as an innovative response to the urgent need to reach young women of color across under-resourced communities. WOW launched in Boston in 2001. I'm sorry, in 2021. Both our BAM and WOW programs are strategically designed to create safe and student-centered supports that promotes academic, social emotional development in our young men and women. Dr. Welch, the past couple of years have been full of emotional challenges for all students, and especially students of color, including the loss of life from the global pandemic. As we know, students were unexpectedly separated from their classmates and support centers due to school closings and a continued civil rights crisis. Partners in the district have provided supplemental enrichment to students in support of their social emotional learning. How do you intend to support and enhance the relationships between BPS and community partners for the benefit of students' social emotional learning? I'm sorry, for the benefit of students' social emotional well-being.
Thanks, Sean. It's great to see you. You just reminded me 2017. I think I was at that kickoff, either at Madison or English High. I can't remember, but it was a great thing. And I've seen your work in progress at English, Charlestown, East Boston High School. Even bumped into your kids at a Celtics game a couple months ago. As I said earlier, I believe this is of utmost importance to make sure our kids are prepared to be in schools. I've been a big advocate for social emotional well-being. I've been on the Health and Wellness Council all 7 years that I've been working with BPS. So I value the work you're doing. I appreciate it. I think the question was, how do I intend to support and enhance coming out of the pandemic? And we've seen violence, we've seen challenges happening in our schools this year. I mean, I was at Charlestown High School when we had an incident on May 19th, as well as I was on stage last Monday. I'm glad we were able to make it up to the kids. BU stepped up. We had a rescheduled graduation ceremony, and it was a beautiful thing. But these aren't just isolated incidents. They build up over time, and it's still going to be several years till we get it right. And so thinking about that and thinking about where we currently have our Esser investments for the next 2 years at least, right? Hoping maybe we could get a little extension, but how can we wrap our arms around the schools who are experiencing the most trauma, the most struggles with issues with their students, their families, and quite frankly, the entire community, to see how we can take a longer term approach to get it right, proactively understand that we have some investments that we can build capacity and build knowledge and build expertise for when 2-3 years from now, once we start working back towards what we had in 2019 and before, which I think was a little bit more stable, even though there was some issues there. It would be a priority of me. As I said earlier, I think the second question, or maybe the first question, as a superintendent, I can't do it alone, right? As the CEO of BAM, you can't do it alone. You need people to help you. I need people to help. And this kind of symbiotic relationship with all partners, especially organizations like yours, is something that we need to amplify. As a superintendent, what I can do is bring people who maybe don't have experience with your program, looking at what it looks like in the middle school years, which is going to be a challenge for our schools. Now we're going to have 11 schools that have 7th and 8th grade in it coming up next year. It's a different beast. I've been a middle school principal. I've been a high school principal, and there are different challenges, but they come from the same root. I'd love to give you an example. I mean, I didn't do an official program like you, but as a middle school principal, we identified a group of young men who needed extra support. And I actually took 7th period. We had 7-period days, and I got on the schedule, and we called it, it was a leadership class on the schedule, but we called it, the kids called it, they called it the Boys to Men Club. And it was a leadership class for our students. And it wasn't the exact same thing that I see in East Boston High School that your coordinator does with our students, but it was trying to get to the root of these issues. And I partnered with a yoga studio. I partnered with motivational speakers. I couldn't do it my own, right? I could facilitate it, I could set it up, but I could not do it on my own. So we're going to continue relying on partners like you and amp it up as we move forward, especially with this investments that we have for the next 2 years.
Thank you, Dr. Welch. Gratitude.
Okay. Am I muted again? No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Brown, and thank you, Dr. Welch. This is Pam speaking. We will take another question from the public, again, submitted anonymously through the Superintendent Search Survey. So Dr. Welch, how will you improve BPS arts education and increase links between students and Boston's very strong and vibrant art community?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I really appreciate it. I don't know who sent it, but I think arts is a huge priority of mine ever since I would say, well, let's get real. Like since I first became a principal, my first principalship was at a middle school. It was called the Dr. Julian Nava Learning Academy of Arts and Culture. Heavily invested all of my electives into dance. We had orchestra, we had band, and we had the physical arts, the fine arts. And, I think that kind of framing of like seeing the joy and how teachers connected with the other content areas in their work. It wasn't just done in isolation. So students see how their work lived in other subjects as far as their artistic talents. One of the things that, an example that just happened yesterday, I mean, if you follow my Twitter feed, TMW Grade 1, you'll see a partnership that we had with Harbor Arts and Eastie Farm just unrolling today. Yesterday was the big culminating celebration at the Bradley School. Today is at the Umana. If you guys could get down there in the next hour. We brought in world-class muralists to work with our students to expand. These are schools that use every square foot of their classrooms and building space, but to expand art and science into the outdoors. And what the students did is they worked to design and create these beautiful murals with these professional artists with their input. So these things could take many different forms as far as partnership. I would love to see more of our electives, and I want full-time electives. Some of my smaller schools have half-time art teachers or 0.6, 0.4. I think it needs to be a priority. It helps. It's a separate outlet for our students, and it brings out the untapped potential in some of our students that I see on a daily basis as I'm in classrooms every single day.
Thank you. And next up, we have Kate Barron. Kate?
Good morning, Dr. Welch. Nice to meet you.
Morning.
My name is Kate Barron, and I'm the President and CEO of Horizons for Homeless Children. We are an organization that focuses on the needs of children experiencing homelessness, and we do this through an early education program in the city of Boston with extensive wraparound services for the children to mitigate the impact of homelessness and make sure that they are school ready. We're also one of the, I think, larger providers of UPK in the community. We will have 5 classrooms next year, and we are huge supporters of the program. Child poverty rates in Boston are more than double the average across the country, and research clearly shows that high quality early education is the most effective way to improve the likelihood of future success of children living in poverty. But in Boston, we all know that there are too few educational seats to serve all of Boston's eligible children between 0 and 6 in the early education sector, and that the sector itself is a complex mixed delivery system of center, school, and faith-based programs and family child care providers. How would you propose to actively collaborate with the early education community, provider community, which is vital to serving the needs of Boston's children and families, and also to the further expansion of the UPK program? And if you could give specific examples as to how you would partner, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Well, nice to meet you, Kate. Thank you for the question. I love this question because I was a parent trying to navigate the early education system. My kiddos are now 5 and 7, so luckily we figured out. So the stressful time a couple of years ago are now behind us, but I know it is a real issue for thousands of parents across the city of Boston. Before I get into the proposal of how to collaborate, I just want to note that in 2016-17, we had the opportunity to expand K1 seats, in some cases K0, in the city of Boston. I think that year we expanded almost 275 seats across the entire district. And what I did as a regional superintendent, I went to every single classroom in every single school and said, this is the opportunity. They're going to be expanding early education seats. In East Boston, Charleston, North End, we found 160 of those 275 seats in that region, which greatly expanded the odds of my children getting into school, but it didn't happen because it's a lottery and my daughter didn't get in until K1. So, but it benefited 160 more students. We're also currently expanding another classroom this year within the region. So working on it, continuing working on it. How would you propose to actively collaborate with early education? So I am working with an organization called Every Child Shines in East Boston. And there's the East Boston specific grant that we got in partnership. We work with the East Boston Social Center, Justin Pascadillo. But this grant is coming from the Children's Bureau. It's a multi-year grant, but it really focuses on what that cradle to kindergarten readiness looks like. Working with us, collaborating with us is Boston Basics. So Ron is on our team. We're actually having a symposium this summer involving Kristen McSwain and other leaders in the community, but really trying to address how everybody in this little zip code, which was granted this amazing $750,000 grant, can wrap their arms around the issue that you're talking about right now. Private care, out of district, pre-K, and as well as our early ed programs that we have in East Boston. And so I think that getting everybody to the table, working with, in this case, East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, who has access to approximately 400 new East Bostonians every single year. Understanding how to engage with parents at the way that works most effectively to ensure that we are looking at weekly, monthly milestones as we move from infancy to toddlers to actually enrolling into some of the programs that are not necessarily BPS. The other thing that I'm really interested in as we're trying to work this through and it's a 3-year grant that I mentioned, is how are we measuring kindergarten readiness, no matter if they come in to us at the age 3, at the age 4, at the age of 5. I think that working with our early education department, as well as some of our national partners, will get us there. And then the other thing is that what's important to me as a former early educator is the handoff of information. Sometimes as a teacher, as a young teacher early in my career, we'd get students and it's like, took the first month or so to figure out like what their needs, strengths, and areas of improvement were. If there was a standardized way, or at least some form of way to hand off information from the private care, from even if they're working at a home daycare, any basic information to help us assess that kindergarten readiness, so we can hit the ground running in September without wasting any time, because we know that building the literacy skills, early literacy skills, leads to future student success. And that's how I'd approach that. So I would love if you came. I think the symposium's on July 12th, 13th, and 14th at the Hilton Garden.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that my video is going on and off. I can't seem to get it to work, but I appreciate your answer, and I couldn't agree more that we need great information transfer. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Pam speaking again, and my apologies actually to Ms. Boran. I've been pronouncing your last name wrong. It's Kate Boran. So my apologies.
You're among many, no worries.
I have actually a public announcement, and those of you who are participating, we welcome you to submit live Q&A questions if you would use the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we will pick them up and read as many of these questions as we can to get to the end of the session today. So next up, we have Daisa Santana. Ms. Santana?
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Good morning, Dr. Welch. My name is Daisa Santana, and I'm a proud BPS alumni. And today I'm the director of the Youth Development Network of the Boston Public Health Commission, which is a school-based case management program that works to re-engage students that are chronically absent back into their educational journey. We strongly believe, and data supports, that education is one of the main social determinants of health. The Boston Public Health Commission has a long and strong relationship with Boston Public Schools through several school-based programs, after-school programs, and other health initiatives. My question is, it's a big one. What do you see as the root causes of the current rates of current absenteeism among BPS students? And as a superintendent, what new strategies will you implement to reduce chronic absenteeism? Thank you.
Thank you, Daisa. First of all, I believe our kids need to be in school if we want them to be successful. In your sector, being in school correlates to health. For me, it's readiness for the next grade. It's learning to read. It's the academics, right? But either way, we're going after different reasons for why we're addressing chronic absenteeism. But I think that at the end of the day, it's the same fight that we're fighting. Yeah, I just want to highlight one quick thing. I was at a 6th grade culmination just 2 days ago, and what's stuck in my mind is they do all the 6th grade awards and things like that. Every single student that received the perfect attendance award, those students were students that also received the honor roll award. So being in school does make a difference, and it's more important now than ever because we are recovering from a kind of fractured learning experience over the last 2 years. And there's going to be a lot of catch up. The question is, what strategies would implement to reduce chronic absenteeism? I've seen this from the alternative education perspective. There was 1 year that I worked on the high school team, and a lot of our students, this is the reason why they are off track. A lot of them are old and far from graduation. Some of them are old and close to graduation. But if you are not there, you are not attaining your credits, you're not working towards graduation. I say that only because I see chronic absenteeism in our district as kind of like a bifurcated issue. There's the high school side, and then there's the early education, early elementary side. And the reason why I see it in 2 buckets is because I think that we as an organization are a lot more responsible for what is causing chronic absenteeism in our lower grades. Most of the students who are being bused are our most vulnerable students. There are students in IEPs, there are students who are learning a new language, and they're coming from great distances to go to their schools. It's no mystery, no hiding the fact that we struggle with transportation. But if we cannot get these students to school, if we are, have a 90% on time rate, that means there's quite a few students that may not be going to school every day just because their bus doesn't pick up with them. This is something I see every single day in my schools, and I'm more concerned about the drop off rather than the pickup. A lot of times we deal with the drop off, the pickup and take home later. But my point is, if we cannot get the students to school that we promise, we are actually contributing to the chronic absenteeism that we are monitoring so carefully that we know has detrimental effects to our students. As far as high schools, right? I have one of the high schools that has the highest chronic absenteeism rate. Our high school students, they have very busy lives. I think that our teenagers' lives haven't adjusted from the time that we had during the remote learning, where a lot of them took on jobs and other responsibilities. Yet when we came back to school in September 2021, many schools still had the 7:15, 7:30 start time. The unfortunate thing about high schools, it's a great thing, but also unfortunate, some of our kids are coming from across the city to be at their school at 7:15, 7:30 in the morning for start time. And, one of the students who spoke at the Charleston High School graduation, great kid, Jaden and I connected over the last several months. We sat on a committee together, but he would tell me I would have to wake up an hour and a half to commute all the way from my home in Dorchester to Charleston High School. This is a huge deterrent factor for our students, and I'd love to tackle that head on as a superintendent. Busing, even public transportation, it becomes an issue for some of our students when you got to get to school that early for high school, especially when the weather drops below 30 or 25 degrees. It's a barrier that I think we're creating that we need to address. But as far as the support, every school, thanks to this tremendous investment and the hard work of Dr. Caselius in getting a $100 million, basically a baseline increase in our budget to support positions such as social workers and family liaisons. We now have family liaisons in every single school, a whole FTE, full-time employee. When this thing first rolled out, I had schools that have like 2 days of family liaison, and then 3 days, the family liaison would go from 2 days from one school, 3 days to the other. Now they're full-time. And I think this is going to help us further strengthen relationships with the students and the families, sharing how important it is to be in school and the effects of not coming to school and being chronically absent, missing out, quite frankly. I do think that strategies that have been implemented on a national level, there are several companies that do nudge letters or text messages or things like that, just to let folks know automatically, like, hey, your student didn't show up, or your student showed up at 10 o'clock and missed the first 2 periods. I would love to engage with those tools to increase the communication, because a lot of times I talk to some of our parents in high school and they're really upset that their student's not graduating or participating in prom or something like that, but they didn't realize that their student hasn't been coming to school for a month, right? So increasing the communication, the outreach, getting coherence with the way that our resources that are now on campuses support our families and students, connecting the dots, actually showing the students as early as 7th grade when they enter our high schools in some case, this is what it means to be in school every day, and this is where it takes you versus what happens if you don't go to school and you get behind. So those are all strategies that I would take.
Thank you, Dr. Welch.
Thank you.
This is Pam speaking again. Dr. Welch, the next one comes by way of the Superintendent Search Survey. How important are sports and extracurricular activities to you? How do you make those parts of the program excellent while you're improving schools?
That's great. Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Pam, for that question.
Okay.
So, I think that the best vantage point for me to answer this was as a principal working on middle school and high school campuses, because I saw it firsthand, being on campus 12 hours a day, understanding what our, young teenagers and our teenagers want that entices them to come to school. So kind of related to the last question. When I opened the middle school, it was a blank slate, a brand new school. And we got to ask the kids what they wanted as far as extracurriculars. And it actually helped us shape some of our elective offerings. But we quickly understood that students that were more disengaged quickly became more interested in school when we provided not only opportunities, but well-run, efficiently run high caliber opportunities after school, providing dance team, marching band, these type of activities that are highly structured and provided by professionals is what makes I think the overall approach to educating our students a priority in our schools. So I think that, you know, understanding like we can't do everything for every single student, every single school, but what can we do really, really well based off of the interests of our students, and creating a situation where our schools are not just open from, our high schools and our middle schools aren't just open from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., right? Like, what does it look like to truly create this sense of belonging and a sense of empowerment for the students to be a part of their school and use some of the strengths that they have within them, may have not always been tapped into. We have to ask the students, what are they interested in? How can we make it better for them? Because I think at the end of the day, it's all about engagement, but we have to go all in with a few of the things, not just have a whole bunch of programs that we kind of do, you know, half-heartedly.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. This is Pam speaking. I always forget that to tell the ASL interpreters that this is Pam speaking. Next up, we invite Jose Masso to present his question.
Hi, good morning. It is a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Welch. My name is Jose Masso, and I am a proud alumnus of Boston Public Schools. I'm also a proud parent of a Boston Public School student. Additionally, I am the Chief of Human Services for the City of Boston, in which our cabinet promotes and ensures the well-being of Boston residents, especially those with the greatest needs. I have the pleasure within the cabinet to oversee several departments: Boston Public Libraries, Age Strong Commission, Veteran Services, Office of Returning Citizens, Youth Engagement and Employment, and lastly, Boston Centers for Youth and Families. Today, I'm here on behalf of Boston Centers of Youth and Families, also commonly known as BCYF, which manages 35 facilities across Boston, including community centers and pools, many of which are in shared facilities with BPS. My question for you is, as superintendent, what would be your approach to deepening the partnership between BCYF and BPS for both students and families, particularly around expanding summer and after-school programming?
Thanks for the question, Jose. Appreciate your work. Sounds like you have a wide portfolio of work to that you bring to the city. BCYF, the one in East Boston that I work with most closely is Nicole Da Silva over there on Pear Street. She's amazing. I know your pool's getting constructed. You guys are temporarily using the Masso, so lots of touch points there. But yeah, I appreciate the question. You know, I come from a school leadership background where the school was open as long as possible. When I was at Jefferson High School, it was literally 7 o'clock to 10 p.m. with after-school programs, supports not only for the high school kids, but adult school programming, as well as programming for some of our youngest learners in the neighborhood. We did not have a community center. We basically treated our school as a community center. But I see the value in it. Some of our students, this is where they're at for, you know, the majority of their time during the day. So really extending the campus to some of your facilities, like we'll use Pear Street, for example. It's in the middle of 3 very walkable distance schools that can, you know, benefit from these partnerships. I know some schools are taking advantage, especially if the BCOF centers are actually in or attached to the buildings. But I would love to see a more direct connection with some, and it's not just on you guys, it's also on our school leaders. I think that emerging from the pandemic, people know that partnerships and know that this outreach and this intentional connection is important. But I think that this summer, we need to recalibrate and say, these are the priorities of our students. Some of the schools get out at 2:10 in the afternoon. Like if I'm a working parent, like what am I going to do with my students at 2:10? Really connecting the school. And I'm thinking of one right now that's literally a block away. The Dante Alighieri Montessori is a block away from the BCY Pear Street. Only a few students are participating. How do we formalize these relationships to say, you have a need, we have a service, how can we work together? I would also love to see, and just to get it kickstarted, right? We have Esser funding, which can be supported for things like this. If you guys have programming and we have a couple extra dollars within some of our schools, how do we actually start a partnership, knowing that in the next 2 years, we may need to scale it back, but what systems can we put in place to ensure that our parents and our students understand the value of these partnerships? Because a lot of it, I think, is that the parents don't know, you know, how valuable it is to have students participating in after-school programs or evening programs at these facilities. Perfect example in my own kids' school. parents have been fighting for years and years and years. They're a 9:30 start school. Like, we want a 7:30 program before school, right? And we finally were able to fund it through these Esser dollars. And we introduced it and we rolled it out. I think it was January. And after all the people that were fighting for it, I want to say like 10 people showed up for the first month. But as soon as people realized that it was there and it was a quality program, they now have 3 full classes every morning. And my 2 students are part of those programs. But it's one of those things where we got to get people in. They got to see the value. They got to see how well it's run. Some of your beautiful facilities. I can't wait till that pool opens on Paris Street. But I think it's a partnership that we need to reintroduce and be more intentional with between the schools and organizations like yourself.
Okay. Jose, yes?
Great. Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Dr. Welch, we're going to do a little time check. We're at 11:25. We're together until 11:40, and you have to give me a minute for closing. So we'll have it till 11:39.
Okay.
And these questions, the questions coming after, are actually questions that are live that's been offered to us through the Q&A function of Zoom. So we have a bit of a lightning round, and we're going to try to get through as many of them as we can, if you can help us. Okay.
Limit myself to 2 minutes. That's what you're saying, Pam.
Well, I'm just saying be succinct so we can get through as many of these as we can.
All right.
All right. So first question: what is your vision for integrating behavioral health through internal BPS staff like social work, as well as the many behavioral health partners into schools?
That is a great question. And I mentioned several times throughout this session, like, this is an area we really need to focus on, just because, I know we've had a year of more normal return to school, but we are seeing the challenges that we have, not only with our students, but, some of the adults. Like, we're just figuring out how we can wrap around and get more support. I say this all the time. I'm a very distributed leadership model is what I embrace. I can't do it myself, just like a department cannot do it by themselves. I think it was really strange to see our partnerships not being allowed on campus during COVID time. We know we had to do it, but understanding that whole pause on bringing people in, which was the normal thing we've done for several years. I think we need to reestablish those structures and how we do it. And it's not that we don't know how to do the work. I think that we just need to be intentional on how we bring these folks together. I would love to work with my behavioral health team and BPS to prioritize these partnerships because they're here in Boston and we have challenges in Boston. And I think that the work can be amplified. Several times I said, working together is better than working alone. And in the very first question, I think that Marinelle asked, people have to understand why we're doing it, how it's going to work, and be intentional how we plan. Just like a teacher's lesson plan. You can't just say, here's a lesson, go do it, right? It takes time, planning, agreement, how we're going to do business together, and specifically what students we're working with, what adults we're working with, and what are the expected outcomes. Was that fast enough?
That was very fast. Again, this is Pam speaking. Thank you. The next question: how will you ensure that Esser funds are spent expeditiously, equitably, and strategically to support student outcomes? And also, will any of these funds be used for partnerships?
Yeah, that's a great question. Esser is always on the top of people's minds right now. I think we had $435 million over the 3 rounds of investments. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And right now, I don't know the exact number, but I know it's still in the 300 millions that we still have available. So this 3-year investment quickly became a 2-year investment because it's literally going to finish in September 2024. I do not want to be the school superintendent who has to return $100 million in Esser investments back to the federal government. And so thinking about to the part of the question about spending expeditiously, we need to get the money in the hands of the folks who are closest to the schools. This money was intended for our students who were most dramatically affected by the pandemic. Those people, in my mind, are the school leaders. Even if there's things that are out of their reach, such as school leaders, not like the facilities expert, but if a school leader knows that the one project that'll make this school more inviting and welcoming to their students that they could actually pull off, let's do it. If it's a new playground, if it's a new turf field, I would love to get those out there, knowing that 2 years to actually fund, plan, bid, and build these things may be a short timeline. It also tells me that we need to bring on a whole bunch of human capital on our side to get these projects done. As far as the partnership side of things, again, 2 years to spend $300-something million is a very short amount of time. Our school leaders know best in their school communities what their students need. It shouldn't be a fight, and it shouldn't be a fight to get the money once we establish the partnerships. I would really like to reassess, get the money to our principals as fast as possible so they can make the decisions that impact the schools and the students that the way that they know to do it best. The other thing that I would like to lift is when this investment first came out, I worked with my 15 school leaders, and one of my school leaders at the Elliott, she says, what's the 135? The 135 plan. What are we going to do this year? What are we going to do in 3 years when the money goes away? And what are we going to do in 5 years as we are sustaining a world where there's going to be a fiscal cliff? So really planning what these Esser investments go to as far as building capacity, either with our partners, balancing the amount of support that we need right now to recover with the students who are struggling the most, as we've seen in our formative assessment data, but that delicate balance, knowing that the money is going to go away or being taken away from us in September 2024. So yes, I need a tight timeline. I need this money out. I need it to be impacting students' lives.
This is Pam speaking again. Thank you, Dr. Welch. The next question from a proud BPS graduate who said, traditional education did not work for me and doesn't for many students. I tried to succeed at Boston Latin School for 6 years, but found an instant home after transferring to Boston Day and Evening Academy. How will you prioritize alternative education for in your administration at central office and student experience level?
I love this question. All right. I was a teacher and an administrator in Los Angeles in alternative education. It was in the evening programs. I served as the high school administrator, regional superintendent for alternative education schools in 2018. And so I got to see this up close and personal. We used the Ernst & Young Parthenon report that came out on off-track youth. I think it came out in 2017. That was our guide. And we really looked at the data. So the first time what we did with alternative education was like, we have a whole collection of programs in schools. We can't do everything. Every small school can't do everything, but how do we specialize some of the services that can help us amplify the support that we bring for our students every single day? We met on a monthly basis, like strategizing, looking at details, looking at data to understand how we could become a more efficient machine. I really appreciate the fact that you called out you were an exam school student. I met 2 exam school students at that time who graduated from the Boston Collaborative High School, which is a collection of small alternative programs. And they said roughly a very similar story. They excelled in academics, but it wasn't the place for them because there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and they found the perfect program for them that you wouldn't typically think an exam school student would go to, but there is a program for everyone. And so I think that really looking at that portfolio, looking at how we can expand some programs that are successful, looking at twilight options, expanding some of our adult school options to be a real pathway for some of our overage students to a diploma, expanding and sharing those best practices at BDA. Allison Ramish does an amazing job with her team. I used to love going there and looking at how they embrace the students' interests, either going to Harvard Med School or taking a 3-week boat trip around. I think they go to New York. Like, these are things that are interesting to students, working with the health reservation, finding the interest that keeps students in schools and getting them to that finish line is the ultimate goal. And so I really appreciate that alternative education, and to my team out there, the alternative education principals, I can't wait to work with this team again.
That's terrific. This is Pam speaking again. The next question is, please talk about the importance of multilingualism in education and what is your experience with this work?
All right, multilingualism. So my wife is an English language learner. Her family's from Guatemala. She was the first one born in her country. So I see it every single day the value of multilingual education and the benefits she receives as being proficient, bilingual in Spanish and English. I see her counseling her students. She works at a high school. Like being bilingual will basically get you a job in any organization in Boston right now. It is a skill that is a highly valued skill as we move, and it's going to continue to be a high valued skill. From the early age perspective, early education in our elementary schools, I taught 100% of my elementary students in my very first couple of years were students who were new to the country, primarily from Mexico and Central America. Even though at that time there was this, state law that said English only in the classrooms, we got by supporting our students in Spanish, working with them so they would not only develop their own native language, but also our English language development that was asked for us based on our state curriculum. I think that the value of being bilingual, and I see a lot of times of our students, once they crack the code and learn English and learn to read and write, they kind of move away from their home language. It really alienates our parents and families who don't necessarily develop English skills as fast. Like my mother-in-law, she's been in the country for almost 39 years now, and she still feels uncomfortable speaking English. So just imagine the alienation of our students who switch to predominantly English and lack the communication at home. So it's of utmost importance for me, not only for the academics, but for lifelong learning, lifelong job opportunities, but also to keep the family, make the fabric of the family at home, which is extremely important to me. And I see it every day in my home with my, my wife and how she supports our family.
Okay, thank you. And our final question: how do you describe the relationship between BPS and the Boston Teachers Union? And can you elaborate on your approach to contract negotiation?
Okay, so thanks for that question. You said the best one for last, right? Yeah, I firmly believe in the importance of our teachers union as well as all unions. As a young educator, I was my building rep at an elementary school in Los Angeles. And then I became a principal. So you could say like, oh, you're on both sides of the coin, but I think it's really, we're all at the same page, same table. It's a round table. We're all working for the same thing, which is to benefit our students' experience in education. I have not been on contract negotiation tables, but as soon as I become the superintendent, I will be at the table every single day until this contract is negotiated with the teachers union. My relationship with BTU, I've done some very challenging things in my schools that would be considered very disruptive to our veteran teachers or our tenured teachers, including breaking up a school and readjusting the model of one of our dual language schools. At this time, there was 28 teachers that had to relocate to different schools, but it wasn't just me closing the positions and moving them out. It was a dual language school that was growing up, so we really needed bilingual educators. It was a partnership with me and those teachers, and I took the lead more or less as the principal during those 3 months, where I was actually brokering meetings, demo lessons, resume workshops with the local principals, with the teachers, but giving them opportunities to go to my other schools in the neighborhood. This is at the same time when we expanded to K-6, so 5th grade to 6th grade. There was a whole bunch of 6th grade openings available. So it wasn't like the teachers were left high and dry. I helped them find positions in other schools to make it as least disruptive as possible, knowing that changing school communities because of a change in the education model is a very challenging thing for people to deal with because you're emotionally attached to your buildings. But throughout the process, communicated with our area reps, our BTU leadership, so they understood what I was doing and that I wasn't just this like big boogeyman who was like trying to like disrupt everybody's lives, but understanding that I was working my best to make sure that everybody had a place as we move forward with this new school model.
Okay. Well, thank you. Again, this is Pam speaking. Thank you, Dr. Welch. That's all the time we have for today. We are concluding at 11:40 in our session today to keep the interview session for yesterday and today consistent. Both candidates were given 45 minutes. we had to accommodate technical difficulties yesterday. We will, though, keep the Zoom room open until noon in case anyone joins late and find no one here. We'll put up a message so we don't confuse folks. I want to thank our panelists for their thoughtful questions, and to the public and our communities for your participation and engagement. And of course, to Dr. Tommy Welch for spending your time with us today. The full schedule of public interviews can be found at the following website, bostonpublicschool.org/SUP, and that's SUPT-search. We hope to see you later again this afternoon for the next panel, starting at 1:30 p.m. And then later in the evening for the school committee interview from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.